Hello, welcome everyone. We're going to wait for everyone to hop on. Hi, Erin.
Hey, how are we?
Great. Just need to make sure that everyone can find the link. Okay. Um, for those of you who joined, can you let me know, like thumbs up or react if it was pretty easy to find the link join button?
Are
Great.
we also recording? It looks like we are. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay. And then Aaron and Sean, I can also like share my screen so I can control that. Okay. Okay, for those hopping on, we'll probably wait like a few more seconds for everyone to trickle in. Um, fantastic. And if you have not joined a boot camp before, so I'm Karina. This is Aaron and Sean. We are part of the activations team. Um, and yeah, just really working to get folks comfortable and up and running with the platform and hopefully connected with a dedicated AM. And we will run through more of like what that looks like in a second. Um, yeah, let me check my sec. Okay. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can we see this?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Okay, and for those of you who are on, there is a Q&A available or on Zoom. And so what you can do here is just make sure that like you are going to the Q&A function, you're able to submit a question anonymously if you don't want your name attached to it. So do feel free to, clarify that and edit that if you don't want to have your name visible. But okay, so let's get started here. Okay, so this is the third session of our boot camp series. Essentially, our sessions 1 and 2 were really focused on getting comfortable with the platform on certain features, understanding how to submit a candidate, how to source, pair AI, and like recommended roles for candidates in AI calibration, for example. So those are some of the main themes and topics that we covered. But now it's like now that you're comfortable with all of those things, we want to talk about kind of strategy and understanding deeper things related to like the the role description, intake call, and things like that. So that's what we're going to dive into today. It's going to be a lot of kind of one-off topics and things that we're talking about. So it may feel fast. So feel free to let us know if you have any questions or if you have recommended topics, like suggestions for us as well for future boot camps. So essentially, this is, I kind of like talked about this already, but we are here at week 3. If this is not your third week on Paraform, totally okay. I'm going to show you in a second, like where you can go and watch the old recordings, but we run these in like a monthly cycle. After we do week 4, we're going to go back to week 1, and you can always feel free to join. But the idea here is that we're working towards getting you fully activated and onboarded on Paraform and connected with a dedicated account manager. And your onboarding home base includes a lot of helpful resources. So if your main point of contact is one of the three of us, then you're most likely like an onboarding or activating recruiter. And this kind of walks through more of like what that actually means here. It explains the boot camps, what those topics cover, and there's resources here at the bottom. So some of you may have already seen this guide here, includes all those helpful resources and links like the Chrome extension and whatnot. And then if I go back, these are our bootcamp sessions. So you can go back and watch sessions 1 and 2 if you would like to. Okay, so yeah, so again, what we want you aiming for is 5 first round interviews within the span of 30 days. Or if you get a higher plus 2 first rounds is kind of equivalent to this milestone here. And that gets you connected with a dedicated AM. And if you're curious about what that actually looks like, we also have a page on our Notion home base for you as well. Um, Okay, so today's agenda. So these are the topics that we're going to cover. It's going to be talent density on both the roles and candidates. So how those are scored essentially. And we're also going to talk about understanding like a role. So requirements, must haves, the intake call, and also what it looks like should submit a candidate. We have a decision tree that should hopefully help with this, making this call for you. And then submission best practices, picking and slotting roles, and then fraudulent candidates, trials, and challenges that are available on the platform. So those are the things that we'll cover today. But now I'm going to pass it off to Erin.
Awesome. Okay, cool. We'll get right into it. So, a lot of questions that we get kind of are just about how or I guess let me even back up. We talk a lot about candidate talent density and finding high talent dense candidates, and really focusing on matching the right talent density of a candidate to the right talent density of a role, and specifically that company. So, kind of what does that look like? We'll go through the different breakdowns of how we classify companies, and then also we'll get into the different breakdowns of what kind of goes into how we grade candidates. So, if you can click next slide. Fantastic. So, this goes over kind of all the different ways that we look at companies. And there's kind of a lot that goes into it. I will say this is kind of just how we see it, but we always will defer to you as you guys are the professionals in this space about matching candidates and companies. So take this information, but if you're ever going to use this as a deciding point to submit a candidate, I'd really defer to kind of how you see the best fit for the candidate in the role. With that though, so specifically with companies, they're kind of broken up into 5 different parts. The first one being the technical depth. I also, one quick caveat, a lot of this is specific to software engineering, and it's a lot based off of engineers and their performance. It still goes into companies that are not obviously defined by engineers as well. However, it definitely caters a bit more towards that profession. Um, but anyways, so specifically it looks into technical depth. So it looks at the strength and the seniority of the engineering team, of who the currently of the engineers currently at that company. It looks into their seniority, the strength, of their team. It does look into the hiring trajectory, so the momentum and the direction of the company in regards to how big they're looking to grow and how fast that they're growing as well. So companies that are hiring pretty aggressively and growing pretty fast, that would deem on the higher end of the scale. It does look at the prior employers of the current employees as well. So the staff where they worked previously to being at that company. And this is a lot more focused on like the pedigree. So I know pedigree is a big term that we use in regards to roles. And so it definitely looks at previous to this company, where did their employees work? And big factor in that regard. Then it looks into the domain expertise, so the skills that they have. This is again like this can look like languages that a software engineer knows, but it's really kind of how they are defined in like the hard skills. So what they're actually doing like day to day. And then as well as the network performance signal. So it's kind of like across our Paraform network, we're kind of seeing like how they perform. And if they're successful, if they're doing well, again, if they're kind of, this is in line with like if they're growing or not. So then if you can click the next slide, Karina. Awesome. So this is kind of our top 10 most coveted companies. We don't support all of these companies. However, you will find that there are some similarities between this list and the ones that we support on Paraform. However, I think this is a good way to kind of, if you're ever curious about like this grading scale, definitely look into each of these companies and kind of just see what they are, what they do, how they're growing. And that will also help you kind of get a better idea of how to grade companies on Paraform as well. So you'll see you have top 10 lists. We do have a blog post that actually goes over this, and I think it supports the top 50. So there's definitely more information out there. So definitely, if you're more interested in this, feel free to look on our blog, and there's just more information. It honestly kind of covers exactly what we covered here, but yeah, encourage you to do so as well. Okay, great. So that's kind of the company side of it. So then now I think a part that we talk a lot about is the candidate side. And we also do talk let's well, it's the part that you guys see on your end in regards to when you're sourcing, you see these grading scale, whereas on the company side you don't see that as off. You don't see those actual like letters. So in regards to the candidate, if you can click the next. Awesome. Again, so this is what we specifically talk about. We're like, oh, we really want to put a high emphasis on high talent dense candidates, specifically being A and S tier. S is the highest tier and C is the lowest. However, I will say grading that doesn't necessarily mean that an S tier candidate is better than a C tier candidate. It's more of a matching game. So you want to match S tier candidates to S tier companies, and vice versa. So C tier candidates should also go to C tier companies. And so I get a lot of questions of like, oh, are S tier candidates more successful on Paraform? That's not always the case. I've seen a lot of placements be made with C tier candidates as well. Again, it's more about that matching. So specifically, what are this grading kind of look like? S tier is going to be exceptionally strong pedigree. We'll go into kind of what the breakdown of each of these in the next slide, but at just high level, A is just like a strong pedigree, B is more moderate, and then C is lower. I will say specifically for software engineering roles, I will say S and A tier tend to find more success just because this grading does reflect more accurately for the software engineer roles. And so if you are wondering what archetypes do well, I would definitely try to err on the side of sourcing more S and A tier. Definitely as you are getting started. So specifically kind of what goes into each of these breakdowns are these three signals. Two of them are definitely the more important than the last one. However, they're all factored in. So the first one is the companies that they've worked at previously. So again, the concentration of a strong engineering company. This again is based off of the hiring managers. A lot of times, like you'll see on Paraform in the roles, you have like kind of like candidates that we're like looking for or archetypes that they're looking for, and they're also like we'll put the companies at which those candidates have worked at. And these are in alignment with this. So 50% of that grading goes to the companies that they've worked at before. I will say, um, also with software engineering, there tends to be a lot of preference for high growth startups more than like the big tech. So roles on Paraform obviously will specify if they're interested in engineers coming from big tech. However, I will definitely say companies that are, or candidates that are coming from companies that are a high growth startup tend to be higher on this scale. A big factor as well is schools that are that the candidate attended. This can also look a little bit different for each candidate. If they're a software engineer, obviously we would love to see them coming from a highly graded software engineering school, which doesn't necessarily always mean like the big names. So definitely encourage you to do research in regards to like specific programs. And then the last part to this is just company growth as well. Obviously, you want to see high growth rate. One quick thing that's not on here, but I know a lot of our SPLs have talked about it also is just high growth in regards to a candidate in a role. So if they are being promoted consistently and frequently, that's also a really great signal as well. So that kind of goes into how candidates scoring goes. But again, it really doesn't matter necessarily if a candidate is an S or a C. It's more of if you're matching them accurately to the right roles.
Okay. So yeah, now I want to touch on understanding the role well. So essentially, like before you submit anyone, kind of like what we want to make sure that you're taking time to do, just to kind of like save you time and energy upfront. So in order to deeply understand the role, there's essentially three things that you should make sure you're taking time to do. One, it's reading the entire description of the role, separating must-haves, requirements, and nice-to-haves from the rest, and then watching the intake call. So essentially diving into that. So if we kind of go to, I have a role pulled up, for example, so that we can show. Um, but this is a role, for example, where if you look down, there's a lot of helpful information, and we want to make sure that you're taking time to go through all of these pieces when you start either doing a single submission for a candidate or applying to recruit and having it be as primary. So regardless of how you're submitting the candidate, this process should still be the same. But if you see here under work experience, there are different requirements. So we have, if you hover over these, and this, just to call out here, this kind of like visual of how you're seeing this laid out might change, but we do have must haves. If you hover over here, we have requirements and nice to haves. And the idea here is that, oh, going back here. So must-haves are essentially like there is like zero flexibility on this requirement, or that's kind of maybe a little confusing, but must-haves is like if a candidate does not have this and it doesn't meet them, the candidate doesn't meet this, then they may likely be rejected. Requirements are they need to be there, but it isn't automatic. And so you want to make sure that you're kind of clarifying some items and specifics in your write up, just to kind of say, like, okay, they don't have this, but this is why I really think that they're a great fit. Um, and nice to haves are, of course, just a bonus. Not necessarily going to be rejected if they don't meet this, but of course, it's a really pleasant addition. So just make sure that, for example, if they don't meet all of the requirements, the reason why we want to make sure that you're reading the entire description and watching the intake call is because if someone doesn't meet the requirements, you're able to say, like, hey, they don't meet this, but I know the hiring manager cares about X, Y, and Z. And so just kind of making sure you're essentially like lining up your candidate with the role, and just doing this kind of cross reference piece. So make sure you're kind of going through all of that content. And in addition to that, if you're ever confused, or just want clarity, we do have Parabot at the top. So when you click on that, I actually asked a question before this. So, like, what are the roles must haves? You can see it's already pulling from this role, and it's going to outline some of these things to kind of give you more of an explanation. And then going back to the intake call, so almost every role on Paraform does have an intake call, and this is essentially the hiring manager just going more into the depth on the role and explaining the requirements, and like what the role actually looks like in their own words. So this is content that you're not going to find in the description, and it may also be really helpful for when you're sourcing candidates to the role of like, what should I say when I'm doing outreach, to see if like to make sure I'm painting the role in a good light and making sure it's enticing. That'll probably be really helpful. And you'll also hear like, which requirements are deal breakers, which are flexible, what an ideal candidate looks like. So it's just going to add more color to what you're seeing in the overview here. And I know it looks like a lot of time, like these can be, I don't know, between like 30 to 50 minutes. But taking time to watch this is going to save you some time, like upfront, where, maybe you're submitting a candidate, they get rejected, and you want to push back on that rejection. If you're watching this just to begin with, it'll likely just make sure, you're really taking time to source and add candidates that are a great fit. So yeah, make sure you're watching it end to end. And it's a great way to, not guess about what the hiring manager wants. So yeah, and I will pass it off to Sean for this next piece.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Karina. So this next piece is going to focus on should I be submitting this candidate? So basically, if you're unsure if you should submit a candidate or not, we've developed a framework for you guys to follow as guidance. So Karina, yeah. So one thing we're going to talk about now is this submission decision tree that we made for you guys. This is guidance. It's not a yes or no. It's never this black and white. But basically, the main idea here is we have this doc for you guys that you can click through. It's interactive. It's going to answer you a few questions based off, hey, this is the JD. Does this candidate meet these requirements? At that point, it's kind of up to you guys to make the call. So if we could go to the next slide, I am going to see if I can share my screen here.
If not, I will pull it up too.
Yeah, Karina, can you do it? I'm getting the same error.
Yeah. Okay, here it is.
Yep. So basically, this is what we're going to circulate after this boot camp. But basically, the idea is it is a decision tree that you can follow. So if you want to scroll down, there are some quick disclaimers, but in the interest of time here, let's walk through it. So the first question is, do you know this role's real must-have, the non-negotiables, the traits to avoid, and essentially, did you watch and understand the JD and intake call? So if you click no, as you can see, don't submit. Very obvious. We want to go back and try submitting yes. It's now going to take you to step two. For every one of these must-haves, can you point to hard evidence? Basically, are you covering your bases? If we say yes, it's going to go to step three. Is everything else, clean? Are we checking all the boxes? Is there interest? Are we aligned on comp, location, timing? These sorts of nitty-gritty details, but it does kind of influence the decision. If we do click yes and continue to follow through, submit. So again, this is just a basic guidance framework to follow. The idea is before you submit, are you answering these four questions internally before making a decision? Again, this is guidance. There's always going to be black and white edge cases. But yeah, excited to get this circulated. And there is some other helpful information as you continue to follow along here. If you don't want to make a quick scroll down, different sorts of hopefully helpful guides for you guys. And also kind of covering a little bit more of the candidate first, which is something I guess we could briefly touch on here. So I know a lot of you guys are going to be sourcing strong candidates for particular roles, but let's say you find a strong candidate, but some little detail is off. Maybe they don't meet one of the requirements or not. Don't give up there. You could always submit them to other roles on the platform, and we can kind of touch more into that in a little bit. So if we want to go back to the slides now. So there are, best submission practices here that we can go through to kind of, improve your guys' conversion rates. Because I know it is a little bit, unfortunate when your candidates do get denied. So, if you wanna, yeah, again, so cross submitting. Here's kind of the big thing. So when you guys do source these strong ARS tier candidates that are going to do well, it might be the case that for one particular role they don't get an interview, but don't stop there. Keep them warm. And the idea is there's other roles on the platform that they might be a good fit for. There's plenty of software engineering roles. I know a lot of you guys focus on that, as well as product manager roles. That the idea is if they're not a fit for one specific role, there's recommended roles. There's pair AI matches. So as long as you keep them warm and you open up the idea to them by saying, "Hey, we can cross submit you." And I think one piece of advice that I always like to give is once you do submit or source one candidate for a particular role, like let's say there's a Terraform role that you source a software engineer for. In that initial intro call and introduction, you should spring the idea upon them like, hey, there's other roles too that I'm working on that I think you could be a good fit for. So just kind of bringing that up early and keeping them warm that way is always a good idea. So here's the next thing we're going to cover, which is what to do when a role pauses. I know these sort of situations, they can suck, but a role can pause for a variety of different reasons. Maybe it got filled. Maybe there was a reorg. Maybe there's a budget with the company that got changed. But there is likelihood that it does reopen. So here's how to keep that momentum going. One is waiting for it to reopen. So when that role does come back, hopefully you still have a warm pipeline and you can get right back into it. The other and probably the best option here is to find similar roles. A lot of roles at its core are very similar, especially on Paraform. So, if you have a pipeline for one role and it closes, there's definitely a similar role that you could apply that same pipeline to. But again, the kind of the main thing here is you do want to be targeting these fresh and active roles, looking at the metrics we do have posted on these roles to kind of keep your likelihood and your chances of placement at its highest.
Um, awesome. Okay, so now I want to talk about picking good roles as primary. So essentially, just adding on to what Sean said of picking fresh roles. So just to kind of like remind everyone on like the browse page, we do have smart filters at the top, but essentially like we do want to call out that some pipelines may be really full, maybe a hiring manager isn't quite active, and so how can you go about picking roles where you're avoiding those kind of instances is on the browse page. You want to go and click on the new filter, and you can also mess with the posted at date in case you want to look for roles that are like really fresh, like posted within the last 2 days, for example. And then avoiding crowded pipelines so you can see recruiter talent density. Essentially, that just means like um, it may not always mean how many folks are like slotted onto the role, but it can also take into consideration like how many folks are doing single submit. So is it just kind of a really popular role where there are a lot of recruiters involved in kind of adding candidates there? And then also we have a recommended role. So I would dive into that in a second. But going into like fresh roles, so if we go into the browse page, you can see that here at the top, if I click clear, we do have our new filter. And if you hover over this, it'll say it's for roles posted within the last 7 days. And that'll give you, this list of roles here. And what you can also do, one, you can also toggle table in case this view is more helpful to you. But then reminder that the post-it at date is here. So I can choose to do like, okay, I want to find roles that were new, but we're also getting more granular, posted less than 2 days ago. And I can also kind of add the low recruiter density. And so that'll just help me find roles that are maybe more enticing, where my candidates have more of a chance to be seen and convert. And these are really helpful for folks that are newer to the platform as well. I think that that's one of our biggest recommendations for when you're getting onboarded onto Paraform. And I also want to talk about your daily recommended role. So almost every day, Paraform is going to surface for you a recommendation. So if I go back to my profile here, we can see that I have 3 featured roles. And so at the bottom, it says that I have 6 hours and 32 minutes where if I apply to recruit, I will get auto approved. And this is taking into consideration the existing pipelines that I have candidates added onto. So just like what I'm currently finding success in, what I like to work, and it's also taking my preferences for the roles that I like to work. So I do have 3, so I can kind of search through these and decide for myself if any of these are a fit and if they're worth my time. Sometimes, like for example, it's surfacing one that is a high recruiter density, but it does have 5 openings. We can see that this one is medium. How many folks are currently interviewing? So you can take a look into the existing pipeline as well. But do like look at the like use your like slot these at your own discretion. So it's not saying like you really should apply to recruit for these, but really just take your time to decide if these are a fit. And if it's not, do make sure to update your preferences so that the next ones that you get will hopefully be more specific to what you like to work. So yeah, just pair it with your judgment. And when talking about what kind of roles to slot, do keep a balance. So if you're able to work 5 slotted roles, we recommend having 3 similar roles where you can essentially cross submit your top talent. in case maybe they get rejected or maybe a pipeline becomes a little bit more full. Might want to add them to a different role within the similar mix. And then two different roles to sort of diversify your pipeline, spot new opportunities, and like if you have any candidates that uh, are more like in a different role, if something happens there, you can browse your roles and figure out like if there's any that you want to do a single submit to one that is not a primary role. So yeah. And again, feel free to let us know, chime into the Q&A if you have any questions with regards to this or anything that we've touched on. Yeah. Okay. Next piece.
Awesome. The next three slides we're going to go over are kind of one-offs, I guess, if you will. They're kind of just like questions that we consistently have been getting, so we wanted to touch base on them. I will say this part is definitely really important. We've definitely seen an uptick in amount of fraudulent candidates, and I think there is um, some candidates or fraudulent candidates out there are really good these days, and so we wanted to kind of go over a quick little like couple things to look at to really to see if it really is fake or not. So four things that we should look out for. Well, I guess four best practices to do while you're going through is definitely should hop on a video call with every single one of your candidates and do a screen. I mean, we know all of you guys screen your candidates beforehand, but a video call is most important in this case because it will be really helpful to go back and check through if it is a real person or not if they're on video. So definitely encourage you to do that. Periscribe we have in platform that you all can use. It's in the calls tab under on the left-hand side. So definitely encourage you to hop on a video call with them and screen record it. The next one is to verify the profile on LinkedIn. So, I'm sure as you guys know, candidates can have their LinkedIn profile verified. However, one thing to really look in on is a verified profile doesn't necessarily mean that it's a real person. So specifically, if it's verified, that doesn't necessarily mean that their employment is also verified. So look into it. Be aware of like thin profiles that also have like less than 100 connections, or also if a LinkedIn has been made really recently. You can check when a like how long ago a profile was made by clicking into the three dots on a profile on the top. And then you go into, I forget what it says directly, but you go into the bottom and it says, I think, learn more about this can or learn more. And it should tell you. So definitely look in, see what areas are verified, and kind of also be a little bit wary of the open to work banner, especially with few connections. Um, One thing to also double click on is to make sure that all like parts of the resume clear and like make sense. One example that we have here is that if a candidate has like 10 years of Claude experience, obviously that's impossible because Claude is not 10 years old. So definitely making sure to like go through. One best practice we kind of say is like pick one project and really dig in and kind of look to see if everything kind of makes sense. If you can tell if it's AI generated, definitely you can tell if it's AI generated, if it doesn't make sense, or if things seem a little bit fabricated. Also, spelling's a great one to look out for. So definitely like go through the resume, make sure it clears. And then the last one here is really interesting. So definitely make sure to look at the employer and also look at the client and their footprint. The example that we have here is like if a candidate is if they've had a contract job, it shouldn't say that they were then employed by the company that they were contracted with. It should show that they are part of a contracting agency and that's where who is employing them, not if they're, for example, if they're a contract to, if they were hired via contract to Amazon, they're not an Amazon employee, if that makes sense. So definitely look at all things, and not only look at their LinkedIn, but also look at their resume and also make sure that things double or they match up. I will say like if you have like on the right hand side where it says like a quick rule, if you see one thing that is suspicious, I definitely will then encourage you to like click in and look into further on this profile. Quick things to also look out for is like profile pictures. If the profile picture looks overly edited, or obviously if anything's not accurate looking, or maybe a photo that you wouldn't necessarily see as a headshot on LinkedIn, definitely look in. Again, it's we see these profiles come through, they're flagged, and it will be rejected. It's not that big of a deal. However, it doesn't show the best professionally. So definitely encourage you to be just double clicking on all parts of the submission process for sure. Okay, great. Now, another topic that we get a lot of questions about is trials. So specifically, we get questions about extending the trial. However, I'll go through all parts of the trial. So basically, a trial starts when you slot a role as primary. So when you click to apply to recruit, the blue button on a role, you will then get started on a trial. The trial will run for 10 days. And so the expectation is that you will be submitting two candidates within that 10-day period. Ideally, you're submitting a candidate every 5 days. However, as long as you submit two candidates within that 10-day window, you're golden. Once you submit two candidates in that 10-day window, you will then be off of trial and you will be a full primary recruiter on the role. We kind of think of trials as a way to for you to figure out if you really want to work the role or not. I would think about trials as kind of being a benefit for the recruiter in the sense of if you sign up for a role and say that you want to work it as primary, and as you start sourcing, you realize I'm not really getting great traction and I'm not really getting many people to respond saying they're interested, then maybe it's a sign that you don't want to work it as primary. So if that's the case, you can either withdraw from the role or you can just let the trial expire and it's no big deal. Another use case we get a lot is sometimes hiring managers not providing great feedback and you're just like not finding it helpful. Another reason maybe you don't want to work the role, and so you always can withdraw from it. Um, in order to withdraw from it, you basically on the roll card will click the top three buttons in the top right corner, and you'll click that, and then it will say withdraw from role. Um, However, a lot of questions we get are also like, hey, I went out of town this weekend, or last week I was out of office and I wasn't able to work on my trial. I still really want to work on this role, but I just don't think I can be able to submit two candidates within that 10-day period. We actually can extend the trial. So on the last 2 days of the trial, you will be able to, in the same spot that you would withdraw from the role, you can click on the top three buttons. It will say extend trial, and then you click that, and basically the UI will prompt you how many days you want to extend it for, and you can click on any of them, and it will extend the trial for that duration. One thing to call out here, though, is you're only allowed one extension per trial. So you can't extend it once, and then same thing, let's say you went out of office, you can't extend it again. So just be mindful when you do create that extension, and that you really are picking the best time for you to get those two candidates submitted. Um, and then I think last part is challenges. So we also get a lot of questions about kind of just like what are challenges? How do they work? What's the timeline on them? When does the payout happen? And so figured it'd be important to quickly go over. So challenges basically run weekly, and challenges are a great way to get weekly payouts consistently on platform. So let's say as you're working for placements happen, let's say monthly, you can get paid out through challenges weekly. So it's a way to kind of get quicker cash, I guess, if that makes sense. However, the duration of a challenge runs weekly. We will send out an announcement about the upcoming challenge for that next week on Thursday. And so look, check your emails on Thursday or Fridays. I know time change can be different. I will also say all things come out on Pacific time. So it's going to be Thursday at any point Pacific time. And basically, an email just talks about the challenge that you'll be offered that week or that next week, and then you can go in and pick which challenge you want to be a part of. So between Thursday when the email comes out and Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific time, you will need to pick which challenge you want to sign up for. And then at 9:01, the challenge starts. So anytime after 9 a.m. Pacific time, that's when the challenge starts for that week. And then you have that entire week all the way up until Monday at 9 a.m. of the following week to finish the challenge. We do offer two challenges per week, and they rotate as well. So every week you'll be doing a different challenge, or I guess be offered a different challenge. And so definitely encourage you to pick the one that you find most interesting. I will say the ones that you're allowed to pick from each week are not necessarily different in how they're graded. It's more of how many interviews you're signing up for. So a lot of challenges are based off of submissions and first rounds. And so you are committing to submitting five candidates, or maybe it's a higher degree of candidates. So just pick the one that's best for you. The email on Thursday will explain everything. I will say that the thing to quickly call out here, most of the challenges, submissions only count to a primary role. So just make sure that when you're signing up for a challenge, you read through all of the specifics, and making sure that you understand also the time frame. So always just think it's 9 a.m. Monday to 9 a.m., or I guess 8:59 a.m. that following Monday, and that's your window. A lot of the challenges are based off of conversion rate and success rate. So we do give that next week as a buffer week to kind of let all of your submissions get converted to either first rounds or rejections, ideally first rounds. And so basically, after that second week, if you hit the challenge, then you'll get paid out after that. So kind of think payments happen every 2 weeks. However, challenges only run for 1 week at a time because you have that following week as buffer week. So hopefully that makes sense, but that should be all things challenges.
Yep. Thanks, Aaron, for that. So, kind of just to recap everything we talked about when finding success on Paraform, there's a few different buckets that you always want to be covering. But at a high level, you're prioritizing talent dense roles and top tier candidates by our SNA tier rating system. But again, there's always black and white exceptions. It's not black and white, and there's always going to be exceptions. Um, Bucket two is understanding the roles must haves and watching that intake call before you submit. Can't stress this enough. This is kind of like one of the main reasons I see activating recruiters getting, not really any interviews there. It's almost always because people aren't reading the must haves and they're not understanding the intake calls. You can really think of this as a gold mine to really understanding the recruiters or the hiring manager's brain. And when you understand what they're looking for, it becomes a whole lot easier to source candidates. Third is when you're getting, started on Paraform, kind of using the decision tree that we're going to circulate is a really big thing. The idea here is this enables you guys and provides you with a framework when not sure how to, like when you're unsure on when to submit a candidate or not. But ideally, as you get more accustomed to Paraform and understanding kind of what hiring managers are looking for, you're not really relying on this. And kind of the fourth thing here is really picking fresh roles that are just opening up and that you feel you're best suited to recruit for. There's a whole lot of roles on Paraform and it can be a little bit overwhelming, but kind of understanding what works for you and what doesn't and choosing the right roles for you is really key. Yeah, so now we can get into this live Q&A session. We have a few minutes here, and I know that there's some questions. So if we want to answer them live, Karina and Aaron, we can do that.
I saw one that I just answered actually. I think it's a great question and I want to call it out. The question was, if we don't hit the trial, if you don't do the two submissions in the 10 days, will that affect our score? As well as does withdrawing from a role affect our score? And short answer is no. There is no repercussions from letting the trial expire or withdrawing from a role. If anything, we actually encourage you guys to not work roles that you're not finding success at. So always feel inclined to withdraw from a role if you're not finding success. Um, or if a trial, like that's exactly what the trial is there for. So again, if you're like, I don't really feel great about this role, feel free to let it expire and it's no big deal at all. So great question.
I also see a question on what's the benefit of being a primary recruiter on a role. One of the biggest benefits is that you do get access to communicate directly with the hiring manager. Essentially, like one in your, you have access to them in your messages chat, so you're able to further calibrate on a role and just get more deeper feedback. Like if your candidate is rejected, hopefully the hiring manager can give like additional context because they know that you're invested in the role. And in the activity chat, you're also able to tag the hiring manager because if you're not a primary recruiter, you can only tag the talent partner who works directly with the hiring manager. That's probably one of the biggest benefits. Um, Aaron and Sean, am I missing anything? Mhm.
I don't think so. I think a lot of questions I get from recruiters are like, how should I organize my submissions? And I will say, like, I definitely encourage you to slot roles as primary so you have that experience. And I think, like,
Mhm.
as you source and you see the benefit of working for a primary, I also encourage you to do single submissions and then you can kind of see how they differ. And just having that juxtaposition can kind of show what areas are more beneficial for primary and what's not. So definitely also encourage you to just kind of give it a try and go from there.
Okay. Yeah. And then someone asked how soon you can expect the decision tree to be circulated since it can help with calibration. So we should be hopefully sending that out soon. If not today, then hopefully tomorrow. We can send it in, we'll include it in our recap email, and then it'll also be linked within the Notion um, page that I shared and that we will also send out. Um, let's see. Okay. And we're also getting a few more questions. So I don't know, Aaron and Sean, if you want to like look at those in the next like a few minutes. But what we will also do if we don't get to any is we'll write them out and link them into the bootcamp like resources. So I'm looking at some other ones coming in, but do keep submitting them while we're on right now.
Yes.
There's a question on, can you tap again on single submission? What's the concept of that? Probably missed out. Yeah, single submission is a good tool that you guys have a limited amount of submissions to, but essentially it's if you source a good candidate, and say you're working on a primary role, for example, but you source a good candidate, and you see that there's another similar role on platform, you could then single submit your strong candidates to other roles. Let's say you don't want to be a primary on a role, but you have a candidate that would be a good fit for. That is the perfect time to use a single submission. Essentially, very high level. You have a good candidate. You're not a primary role, and you're not a primary recruiter on a role, but you want to submit someone. That's when you'd use a single submit.
Thanks, Sean. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, we are at time here. Again, remember that these bootcamp sessions are every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And we will begin sending out invites. Previously, we were sending out invites on Monday and reminders on Wednesday, but now we will be sending them out on Thursday. And so, yeah, so expect like invite for next week tomorrow. That way you can add it to your calendar. And if you have any like suggestions on topics, do feel free to let us know. These are meant for you, and we want to make sure that we're covering all the things that will help you find success on Paraform, whether it's anything really tactical, like how do I use this feature? Where can I find XYZ? Down to, I see someone asked a question on like success stories, and hopefully if these are things that are of interest to you, then we will do our best to see how we can get some of that content. So I see that, and hopefully we can find some of that kind of content for you all. So yeah, let us know what you're curious about, and we will see you next week. Hope you all have a great rest of your Wednesday.